Democracy is when I feel happy living in my country, and my neighbor who maybe not, who doesn't believe in the same God I believe, or believes worships in a different way, still feels happy like me.
One. Okay, hello people. Today we have Mr. Robert Clements with us, a columnist in over 60 newspapers across the globe, not only in India but also in Dubai, Bangladesh, and Pakistan as well. Mr. Robert, thank you so much for being a part of the Students' Perspective. A very warm welcome to you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Manav. And thank you for inviting me. I'm really honored.
We are honored to have you, sir. To be honest, the knowledge that you have and the experience, we are sure the viewers and us both will gain very much from this conversation. Okay. So, a very first argument that I get from people who aspire to become writers and who are very avid readers or very avid followers of art is that art is not only, like, they say that art is a representative of a culture. I believe that art was not only a representative but also an influence on a culture. And a very big example for that is a very recent show on Netflix called Queen's Gambit. After that show came into play, people started increasing interest in chess. A very huge spike was seen. And I think that is a very primitive example and an evidence on how art is an influence on culture and not just a mere representative of a culture. What do you have to say on that? What are your views on this?
I would say that yes, there are some uh, opinions of mine on this subject. Again, there's a lot of contrast and clash in the sense that Germany had the best of art, and yet it produced the worst of people during the Second World War. They loved music, they loved culture, they loved paintings, and still, you know what they did.
Hmm.
Having said that, I would still say that after the period of roti, kapada, or makan, in which any civilization, any culture, any country is able to cater to those basics, and people have the food and shelter and so on, then comes the stage of art, and then comes the stage when culture starts setting in. And yes, it does reflect the kind of people that you have, because the final the art that people get into, it talks a lot about the culture of that country, and what how far they've progressed. But
Hmm.
again, there comes Germany, and the question, how did that happen?
But I think if we assume the fact that, so if we are looking at Germany pre World War II, Germany did not have its basic necessities in place, especially during the war times. And because they weren't in place, the hierarchy falls down and art had no influence. So we cannot, I don't think we can use Germany as a very good
I
argument or
would say
example.
that, yeah, we're not talking of just the Second World War. We're talking of the killing of 6 million Jews. And if you've, I've been there. I've been to New York, and I've seen what in the museum what they did to the Jews. And I would say that if anybody, any country, any culture could go to that extent of doing something like that to people,
Hmm.
then the finer points of art didn't reach them.
Then reach them.
It was just superficial in their minds. And that's the question that always comes to me whenever I think that art influences people. I do believe that. But then again, I saw America. I visit New York every year, and I go over there because my daughter is there. And they try to bring in the best of culture all the time. And yet, what a crass, crude man they had as a president. What happened? So there is a basic a need inside of us, which sometimes I believe art doesn't subjugate totally. It comes out in some way or other. And I think only when that inside is satisfied completely and stilled and changes, does the outside of art uh, have some sort of deep influence? But basically, the inside has to change before the
Hmm.
outside influences the person.
Um, Another question that we had was what exactly is offense and how is it justified as a consumer?
When you say offense, what exactly do you mean by offense?
So let's say there was a comedian who wrote something, or we can take the France example itself. There was a satirist, a comic, who made an illustration of their god, and he portrayed him in a very funny way. And the Muslims took offense against that, and there were very, you know, the entire story. There were actions, and then there were reactions, and so on and so forth. It was blown out of proportions. So, how does one justify taking offense, and what exactly does one define as offense from your point of view?
Aha, you're talking of offense in terms of uh, looking at art again. I think it comes down to the artist being careful, and especially, I mean, I would move away from France and so on, and I would still come back to our own country where we have different cultures and we have different people staying over here. And any writer, any artist should take that into consideration. It's not just about, listen, we have freedom of speech, we have freedom of doing what we want. Look at my painting, look at my writing, and appreciate it for the sake of, for it just for art's sake. No,
Hmm.
no, we have to be aware of where we're staying. And I believe this is very important. I know very well that I can crack a joke to my group of college friends and other people who studied with me or who are journalists, who are writers, and so on. But the same thing won't be taken the same way when I'm mixed with other people. And that's where I
Hmm.
have to be careful. So, as a writer, it depends where my writing is going. If it
Hmm.
is going all over, then more careful should I become. If it is just going to one sect of people who I know, then it's all
Hmm.
right. You can crack these kind of jokes, you can use this kind of satire.
Hmm.
But a writer has to be careful, has to know the audience he's writing for. And that's so
Hmm.
important.
It is. It is precisely very important for someone. I mean, I'm a content producer myself, and I have to be very careful about what questions I ask. They cannot be unproductive. They cannot waste.
There's this
Hmm.
there's this phrase which I constantly am reminded of. It's about Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. It's Jesus on the cross dying,
Hmm.
being being killed by the very people, by people over there, and still looking up to God and saying, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Telling God that He understands why they are doing it, and they're not doing it out of cruelty or being an enemy. They are doing it because their culture made them not understand who he was or who he is.
Hmm.
And that's important for all of us. We have to understand when people don't understand.
Hmm. So, okay, if you were in a position where you had to write, how would you consider your demographic and how would you write or phrase something that you want to say, that you want to put across, but say it in a manner that they understand very well and they do not take it out of context or maybe interpret it in the wrong sense? How would you do that? Do you have a set of steps that you go through after that?
Certainly, I wouldn't tread on somebody else's religion.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't do that. It's I know when I got the column in Nagpur with uh, what's Lokmat Times, the paper over there. The editor asked me. He said this is a RSS place, Nagpur, the
Mm-hmm.
headquarters of the RSS. You're a Christian. Will you still be able to write without, carrying certain of your uh, thoughts and feelings and so on over here? And that made me question myself. Would I be able to do it? And now, I mean, the column's been going on for years now. Nobody's taken it off. No, I'm not saying that I don't stand by the truth and I don't write by the truth, but I've understood what it is not to trample on the sentiments of people, especially religious sentiments. I don't.
Hmm. You don't,
At
you
least I
avoid
try not to.
you
I
avoid
try
that.
not to. I try not to. I do bring in my Christian influence very much in most of my columns, but it's not that I'm telling somebody else that you're wrong.
Hmm. So whenever writing or whenever trying to express an opinion, one should be aware of the fact that you do not directly tell someone that they're wrong. Rather, you just talk about your own thing, be in that space, and make sure that you don't hurt anyone else. Because
Isn't that
people,
better?
it is better, and it is, I guess it's more polite to do that in its own way, right? Why there's no need
Yeah,
to attack. There's no point of attacking. Even if it's just for a
absolutely.
joke, there's no point in attacking.
Absolutely.
Okay. So since we've talked about the audience point of view and people who take offense, their point of view, it's only fair to talk about the writers and the artists' point of view. What exactly do you mean by a freedom of speech? Like when people say this is against freedom of speech, especially in India, there are clauses defined against freedom of speech. It's a very exceptional law. It's not absolute freedom of speech, it's a very conditional freedom of speech. But what exactly logically is freedom of speech? I'm sorry for that.
I liked what, yes, I liked what you said about conditionally. Uh, I look at conditionally in a different way. I feel that each of us have a freedom as long as it doesn't uh, hit out or come into somebody else's parameters of causing a problem. And it's a freedom that we have to exercise very prudently. Having said that, I would go into the next part where it's not just freedom of speech, it's freedom to question.
Mhm.
It's also freedom to not agree on something. And that is very important in a democracy.
Hmm.
I always bring in the parallel of a father and a son, and a father telling the son, you know how fathers always talk to their sons and explain something. And then here's a son who looks at the father and he says, Dad, I don't agree. And the father says, now there's two things a father can do. A father
Hmm.
can say, of course you need to agree with me because I told you that you're only 8 years old or 6 years
Hmm.
old. Or the father can say, okay, tell me what you don't agree. And the son says, Dad, this is not something I would agree with you.
Hmm.
Again, the father can do one thing. He can either tell the son, explain to the son in a better way,
Hmm.
or he can look at the son and say also, hey, that's an 8 year old who's thought out something. And he's my son, and he's doing it because he's got a freedom which I gave him, and he's exercising it.
Hmm.
And that is freedom of speech, I believe. The right to not agree and the right to be able to say that I don't agree, and for the rulers and the authority to accept it and say, yes, let us listen to him.
Hmm.
That makes a good democracy. And that's something that is getting less and less, not just in India, but all over the world.
All over the world. But would you do you have a thought as to why is it getting less? Is it just insecurity, or is it some sort of I mean, if it is happening across the globe, then there has to be a reason. There has to be a big reason as to why this is happening. So I
Yeah.
mean, in your life's experiences, you have seen that it is deteriorating day after day or year after year. Why would, according to you, is that happening?
Well, I believe that everything takes a circle. You have the best of democracy, and then you have people who want change quickly, and for change to happen very fast, you need rule. You have rulers who say that, hey, listen, follow this. This will work.
Hmm.
And to do this, they need to pit people one against the other. And in the pitting of one against the other, they are able to get this to work over here. So democracy is a very, very slow process. It's a very slow process. But again, it's not just building Mumbai into Shanghai. That's not what democracy is about. Democracy is when I feel happy living in my country, and my neighbor who doesn't believe in the same God I believe, or believes worships in a different way, still feels happy like me. And
Hmm.
Yet we both might not have a Mercedes, but yet we are both happy living in this country.
Hmm.
That's what we need to work towards getting.
Hmm. So a fast pace,
But
I think.
rulers, but coming to your question, sorry, coming to your question, most of our rulers, most of our the people who come to rule say, "Hey, I need to take them into the next stage, and the next stage, and the next stage," and you know, it doesn't work uh, that way. I mean, people, you have China, which has moved into maybe the 10th stage, and yet people don't have the freedom to exercise their own thoughts.
Hmm.
Would you like to live there? Would you like to live
Definitely.
there?
That's a question.
I'd hate to.
Precisely. So, so quick democracy is a cost of quick development. If you want ra- rampant development and significant development very quickly, you have to give up your democracy. You have to give up your freedom. Only then you may have that. And that is something we have to think about while voting, while maybe electing our rulers. What is their promise, and how are they going to fulfill that? And maybe we
I
shouldn't
would
vote.
ask you, yeah, maybe we shouldn't go there. I would just give examples like any of the Arab states or any of, go into China, and you'll see you have the best of cars, you have the best of roads, you have the best of everything, and you don't have any kind of thinking or questioning by the people. I
Hmm,
wouldn't want to live there. Would you?
no, precisely. That's something to think about. Okay, moving on. Now, a very huge writing again. If someone is a full-time writer, if someone wants to aspire to become a full-time writer, they have to think about it from a business perspective. So they have to think about the money of it. They have to think about the marketing side of it. How much does is the cost of getting money into this business? Because certainly you sell your independence for a sponsorship. Certainly you sell your independence for an advertisement. So how much does marketing, sponsorships, and advertisements affect your ability to write as a columnist or as an author or maybe as a content creator myself? If I get a sponsorship, I cannot talk about them, right? So how much is that? What is the cost of getting a sponsorship? What is the cost of converting this to a business?
Yeah, it's your question has many questions in it, but I'll address one part of it. What you're trying to say is, uh, because as a journalist, it's something I've had to fight very often, because quite a few of the newspapers I write for tell me that right at the beginning, yes, you're writing for us, you can write your daily column, but don't write against this business group. I've
Hmm.
faced it. I've faced it. And it's okay, right, not writing against a business group, because generally you don't write against a business group. But I go back to this instance, and which happened in Goa when I was writing for a paper called the Gomantak Times. And I'd gone over there to a five-star hotel, and I was sitting and eating over there with a group of friends. And suddenly the manager, general manager, came over me, showed me the newspaper with my photo in it, and he said, "Sir, this is you." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Sir, the meal is on us. We are not going to charge you." And I said, "No, I'm going to pay." And he said, "Sir, but we are happy to have you." I said, "No, I want to pay." And my friend said, "Why, Bob? I mean, he's giving it free." I said, "No, he's taking away my right to criticize him and his meal."
Hmm.
And this is some is a con it's a compromise I wouldn't want to happen to my writing.
Hmm.
It Yes, in the process we lose columns, but in the process we gain readers. I
Hmm.
know today my column is one of the most widely read columns in the country, and I think one of the reasons being that I mean, I don't compromise on truth. I don't.
So in this,
And yes, okay, coming to you as a content writer, it's a very difficult choice. It's a very difficult choice because what look at the people in advertising country, companies, sorry,
hmm,
companies. What do? I'm sure most of them are good writers selling products which are third rate. But because of good writing, the products sell. They're
hmm,
compromising. Fair enough. And content writers, maybe for a website and so on, are doing the same thing. But would I do it as a journalist?
hmm.
Why am I into journalism? What is the reason I got into this.
Hmm.
I know, when my column started increasing and went to newspapers, I faced this question because suddenly I started getting letters from prisons in Sri Lanka where somebody would write and say, "Thank you, Bob, your column influenced me." And then came this letter from Khalid Times where I had called the Hezbollah the terrorist. And next day, there were letters from them saying, "How dare you call him a terrorist? He's a freedom fighter for us." And in my
Hmm.
mind, it was like, "Oh, they pay me well. Should I lose this column?"
Hmm.
I mean, you know how the Arab countries would pay. Should I
Yeah.
lose this column? And then came the question which I had asked myself: why am I a writer?
Hmm.
The reader respects my writing because he feels there's some element of truth in it. Do I want to lose my writing, my money, or do I want to lose my readers?
Hmm.
And finally, I had to stick to writing what I felt was the truth. It's a difficult decision. It's a very difficult decision.
So a good rule of thumb would be to focus on the readers, and you will get success later on. You may not get this opportunity right away, but if you focus on your readers, that is your biggest asset. That is your biggest uh, way to get money. And if you lose those readers, you may not get any money no matter how much you try to sell yourself. Would that be a very good rule of thumb to summarize it?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's more of a long haul when you do that, but
Hmm.
it's worth it. It's
It's worth
worth
it.
it. At least you can go to sleep in the night and live with yourself.
Hmm.
You can go to sleep feeling that you haven't compromised.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay, moving on. I This is getting very philosophical, but moving on. Okay, in today's day and age, I don't think not a lot of people want to become authors or writers or columnists or maybe content creators. Like, still, I feel that there is an innate importance to know how to write, and I feel this because a lot of communication has moved on in the form of writing. A lot of deals, a lot of communication is moving on from oral to a very written form of communication. What is your say in this?
I think people don't want to know how to write because they don't want to learn or don't realize the importance of communication. You look more at most of our websites. They they are made by people who are very good at the technical aspects of doing websites, but they're filled with rubbish.
Mhm.
And if only we had good content writers, if only we knew how to draw people towards our site, we would suddenly realize the potential of good writing. But to write well, we need to invest a lot of ourselves into it. Writing doesn't come by just learning grammar. It doesn't come by just learning words. It comes by being able to use the language day after day after day. And like I told you, we discussed this in my in the writers course, which I teach in and which I conduct. I I have what we call the WPC method, in which you write the way you speak, you plan the way you speak, and then you change the way you speak. And in the process of learning to speak well, you write well. But all this takes time, and we don't want to invest time. We have so many other things to do in which we don't have to communicate well, and we invest ourselves there.
Hmm.
But in the process, in the whole thing, communication starts losing out, and the person who's
Hmm.
able to communicate well, he excels. He does well. He
Hmm.
does well. And it's so simple. We just need to learn to communicate better, and we are able to. We will know where to get to. I mean, it'll be a fantastic place where we can reach.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay. So, speaking about writing and the importance of it, how important is it for someone to learn, like, in the sense, learn from a mentor? Like, can writing be self taught, or is it important to go to a mentor? Is it important to look at literature that teaches how to write, or can it just be very, very self taught?
Absolutely self-taught if you want to. Absolutely, you don't really need a mentor. I mean, yes, I do teach writing and so on, but what I teach is what they could have easily learned by themselves. And the best textbooks is books which you read. I mean, I've got all these books here, and my home is full of books. I mean, there's shelves and shelves and thousands of books in all my rooms.
Hmm.
I live with books, and like you said, what do you mean by self-taught? Self-taught is not just to read for content, but to read carefully for style, to work out why Rowling is saying it in a particular way. Why
Hmm.
is she using 26 letters of the alphabet, and by using it have become a billionaire? What
Hmm.
did she do? Interesting. Let me look in terms of how she put her character across, how
Hmm.
she used language, how she used her imagination. And the formula is there in all those books, in all the books over here. What I do with my course, yes, as a mentor, if you would say, is I give a shortcut and say, yes, this is what you can do. This is the way you can study. But finally, you want to do it,
Yeah.
use
True.
books.
So the course is sort of a mix up or a very summary of whatever you have learned through, and that gives you a head start. But eventually, you will have to figure out your formula on your own. There is no rule of thumb to writing. There is no specific set of do's and don'ts list in terms of
Uh,
writing.
no, uh, what I do is, see, at some portion in their life, they can't go back into trying to read as many books as, because childhood is over,
Hmm.
jobs have come in the way, and so on. So what I do is I make them write. I make them write a 500-word article. And then using that 500-word article, I work on it. I show them ways in which they can improve their style. And then using their own work as a textbook, there I come in as a mentor. I would say the first idea of self-teaching is the best way. But if you don't have time, do something in which I can show you the way of uh, studying it in a shortcut method, and we do it within a month.
Hmm.
You write a piece for me, fair enough. I tell you to look at the piece. I ask you what's the foundation of the piece. Then I have a prescribed formula in which I tell you, it has to go a particular way from a plot. It has to be covered like a roof with research. And then you have to have furniture, which are words, and you have to have people inside, which is the passion of the article. And by bringing in all these things into an article, I'm able to tell them, yeah, this is the way of producing good stuff.
Hmm.
But finally, it also comes down to how many books you read. Read books, improve your writing.
Hmm. So reading books just for the vocabulary of the books, or like how is it summarized and how is it the reading between the lines? But there's a lot of things that are written between the lines when you read very interesting books, like for example, I would say Rowling's writing. There's a lot of things that are between the lines when you read at a particular book like a Harry Potter. And is it just that you read for that, or you read for the words, or you read for the style? Like, what are the gains that you make just by reading a particular book in terms of your own writing?
When you look at a book, you look at words, you look at sentences, you look at paragraphs. Then you look at chapters and then the final book. So I tell my students, I said, don't try to read a book. Try to read a page. Read a page and watch. First, you get the content. You get what the author was trying to tell you.
Hmm.
Then you look at the style he or she used.
Hmm.
What? How did they use how did they use a sentence? What did they use? What words did they use in which they got across the meaning to you in the shortest possible manner?
Hmm.
I always believe that the best language or the best writer is one who's able to get across meanings using the less amount of words.
Hmm.
I get students who come to my class saying, Bob, you told me to write a 500-word article. I can write 1,000. I said, anybody can write 1,000 and 2,000, 3,000. But the ability to be able to write a thought precisely within 500, 300, 200, 100 is something you have to learn to do. To be concise, to be conjuice, and to be able to still be able to get the thought across to people. That a good writer is able to do. They won't find them wasting lines trying to get to one thought. By the end of the page, you'll find so many thoughts or one thought which has been hammered into you. That is something that we need to learn from good writers.
That is a sign of good writing,
Yeah.
conciseness, summarizing
Yes.
everything.
Yes.
A good economy of words, you can say that those are the signs of good writing.
Absolutely. And good editing brings you to that. When you edit your article after that, you'll realize, oh, I don't need this sentence. I've already said it. I don't need this word. Or is there a better word I can say it? English is made up of Anglo-Saxon words, and it's made of the words used by the brought in from other countries, from Norway and the Vikings and so on, Latin and so on. So English will always have 10 words for one word, but we'd hardly realize, especially we who have taken English as a second language, that there is still a specific word for what we want to convey. And those 9 other words can be thrown away. That's where we go wrong. We use those 9 other words and we are still known as third world writers. It's happened to me also. I remember when one of my international columns, somebody told me, and this was a reader from Pakistan who was reading my stuff in England, and he said that this guy, Robert Clemens, writes like he's from a third world country. And I said, oh, but I've done my master's in English. What's he talking about? And then I read my English and I said, hey, and I started studying American writers and English writers, and I realized how we used our article, and the, so often where this is not necessary. And then I started the process of eliminating what I had studied in my schools and so on, because I said, no, I want to be read abroad. I don't want to be stuck just here. I need to reach over there. So I took his criticism as good criticism.
Okay, speaking about that, what is your process of writing? Like, I'll tell you what is my process of framing questions and writing. I have the first draft that I write is just to get in flow, and it is meant for discarding. It is just to have fun with it. I'll talk about whatever I want to. I'll discard the whole thing, and then the second is a more formal and a more refined version of it, and then I start working on the second as a base layer. So, what is your process of writing?
What you're doing is good. I mean, everybody follows their own process. But I'll tell you something. Very often people ask me, okay, so what time do you write? And how long do you take to write?
That's going to be a follow-up question right now.
Okay, so no, so we'll just link it because it's more or less the same thing, in the sense that, so I tell them, yes, my editors from different papers expect me to send the column by 1:30. And I take about between 15 minutes to half an hour, sometimes 45 minutes to write my column. Oh, that means you start at 12:30. You start at 12:30, and before that you're free, isn't it? And I said, no. The whole of the morning, from the time I get up, I've been writing in my mind. I've been thinking. I've been working it out. I've been planning. The whole plot has been planned in my mind. And finally, when I get down to putting pen to paper, or today my finger to the laptop, it is just unraveling or bringing down from my mind what is already there. I'm just reading as if it's a screen in front of me and I'm typing. So the process can take 3 to 4 hours, which is which is exactly what you do when you put it as a rough, when you put it as a rough copy and tear it up. It's your mind. It's put it down on paper. Somebody else might just put it on his mind and keep it over there. So the process takes longer. The physical act is fast.
It's fast. It's more of the abstract act that is not seen. Like it's more tone papers than it's the one paper that is submitted.
Yeah, a tone mind maybe.
In your case, you have that experience and still a newbie. Okay, a final question that we get from a lot of book writers, especially, which is how do you balance between what you want to express as an author, as a writer, and what people want to read? Or what is the trend going on? The topic that you select. For example, the trend right now could be privacy, but I don't want to talk about cyber privacy or cyber security. I want to talk about, let's say, freedom of speech, but that is not the trend. And how do you choose between how do you balance those out?
It's very, very important to be able to write what the reader wants. If you want to write what you want all the time, you might as well write poetry or keep a diary and hide it also so that nobody will read. But having said that, whatever's in your thoughts can be unraveled and opened up to include what is now predominant in the minds of the people. You
Hmm.
know, uh, anything, any thought, even a door opening somewhere far away can be something which you can associate with a country opening its doors or America closing its doors. Any thought can be associated with a general thought. And I feel that your personal thoughts, to be able to be read, should also include the thoughts of your readers. Both these things together should be able to come out. But how does what influences you can be taken, should be taken in a wider, you have to start opening it out to see whether it includes everybody else. That's so very important. That's so very important.
Hmm.
And in my class, I tell people that when you're writing, jump across to the other side of the table and be the reader.
Hmm.
Read. It's like watching a play. I've written about 75 plays. One of the things I had to learn in my initial days of writing a play was watch your play on stage. How do you watch your play on stage and still write? Watch the characters, see them walking up and down, see them reacting to each other's conversation, see them saying their words, and then the other person going into still, listening. And then you write whatever you've tried. You'll find that you write better. In the same way, in the same way, listen to the thoughts of the people because they are your readers.
Hmm.
And listening is a great, great, great part of writing.
Writing.
Listening. You have to listen, keep your ears to the ground all the time to know what people feel.
Hmm. So visualizing and understanding is a very big part of you becoming a good writer. And then you figure out a way, intuitively figure out a way to synergize what is the general thought and what is your own thought. And you figure out a connection and how to connect those so that you have the ability to express you want at the same time giving the readers what they want to read.
Or giving the readers a new thought on the same topic which they're thinking about.
Hmm.
Yes, I understand that you are going through a little bit of worry about this, but have you thought about this? But
Hmm.
addressing the thought of the readers, sometimes giving them something new to think about. And
Hmm.
again, being able to put it across to them in such a way that they'll trust you and they'll say, okay, he's not pushing it into our minds. He's just giving us a new thought.
Hmm.
We still have the right to criticize Bob at the end of it, but let's hear what he has to say.
Precisely. The let's hear what he has to say is the most important part. Because as a creator or as an artist, it's not your job to change perception. Your job is to just give them perception. And your biggest ability to have ears, not acceptance. And people get it so confused. I've seen across my friends as well. So when I do anchoring or when I do this kind of podcast, they tell me, why didn't you convince him about your idea? I'm like, that is not my job. My job is to make him listen to my idea. Whether he agrees to it or not, it is his innate right. And that is so important for you as an artist to understand. Otherwise, your art is never going to be accepted. People will always look at it as an attack, and people will always be receptive and defensive towards it. Again, this
That's
is
so
just a
true because no, what you're saying is true. My younger daughter is a clinical psychologist. Now, most of us think that a clinical psychologist tells somebody that what the way you're thinking is wrong, and this is the way you should be able to think. No,
Hmm.
she listens to them, and she's able to nudge them and make them say, "Oh, okay, could it be this way?"
Hmm.
And that's the job. Half of it is, I would say 90% is listening to them and being able to tell them to say it, say it, take it out of yourself. Let's
Hmm.
hear more of it. And then you make themselves realize that they could have another way of thinking and change themselves. You don't try to do it, but you nudge them into doing it. And that's the job we have to do also.
Precisely.
I'm a German Shepherd sheepdog whose job is, a German Shepherd. I have a German Shepherd. He's not around. He would have loved to have been in this room and stand by me. But if you see them, when they run in a sort of a side way. Okay, that their job is to nudge sheep into the sheep pen. And that I feel is the job of a writer. It's not to bark people to say, listen to me, but it's to maybe nudge them and say, don't you think this also could be right?
But again, that is so precisely confused with manipulation as well, which is again wrong. It's not manipulation. It's more of just self-realization that people have just when they listen to you. It's not manipulating them into agreeing to your ideas. People are very smart to figure that out. And you cannot underestimate your audience that they will be manipulated by it. Even if you feel like that is ethically wrong, they won't be manipulated by it. I mean, it's easy if you say that in a one-on-one context. Like if we both are talking and you have a lot of experience, you may be able to manipulate because of my inexperience. But when you talk from one to many relationship, the world is full of billions. There will be people who are smarter than you, and you do not have the power to manipulate them, no matter how hard you try. And that's why this is also
I
very
hate,
judging.
when you use the word manipulate, I hate that word. Not about you using it, but the way people used to use it. I had not a friend, a person who used to work for me who used to use this word. Don't worry, Bob. We'll manipulate him and get him to. And I just think how strange. We don't want to manipulate people. We want to convince people. We want to convince people about something and also convince with using the truth, which means that I also listen and I'm also able to change my thoughts if he has something more convincing. It's a two-way process.
Precisely. It's a two-way process. And like it cannot be a one-way process, irrespective of the medium. Like if this is going on YouTube, it's still a two-way process. People will look at it, people will read it, people will listen to it. And if they don't like it, they will, even if they don't mention anything in the comments, which I request you to, but even if the audience does not mention anything in the comments, they will still react. And you have to have your eyes and your ears open to that reaction, no matter where you're writing, no matter how much you think that it's a one-way process. You have to be open to that reaction in every form possible. That is so important as a creator. With that said, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for coming on board with this idea in such a short span of time. I think it's a week that we planned this podcast. Like a week ago, I had given you a call that would you like to come on board? And thank you so much for coming in such a short span of time. Thank you so much for your profound wisdom and your experiences and sharing all of that with the viewers here. If you have anything to say for aspiring writers who are watching this.
Aspiring writers, I think the need of the hour is for such youngsters and other people to be able to. Older people leave your legacy. Younger people get into writing because there's a need for others to listen to you. So come in. We need you. We need you. And the world needs you more than anything else. Thank you, Manav. Thank you so much for this opportunity of calling me to your show. And I wish you all the best. Thank you.
So much. Thank you so much. We really hope you had a good time at the and a very good conversation. And we hope that you have a very great day ahead.
Thank you. Thank you.